Good afternoon, class. Welcome back. I am trying to put some finishing touches on our treatment of Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, as we were discussing his contributions in the context of the Transcendental movement, which emerges in the early decades of the 19th century and is important to our exploration of American environmental history, because the Transcendentalists really are a critical link that ties in many ways American perceptions of the natural environment to the mainstream of American thought, and also at a time where the young United States is undergoing some dramatic revolutions in terms of its economy, and by virtue of these revolutions to its economy, also its society and its culture. And so I want to apologize. I'm going to give myself actually a little bit of slack here, a little benefit of the doubt. Talking about the Transcendentalists is not particularly easy. And discussing it with you guys is even more difficult because you ask such great questions and you have such discerning minds, and your discerning minds don't really like to accept meh answers and be satisfied with them. So I am going to be presenting the slides. You'll notice that there are some small alterations to the slides as I present them here this afternoon, but I'm trying to sort of trying to adjust my approach so that I can maybe try to bring to life a little better this notion of transcendentalism. So I hope that this will work, and I'll look forward to answering some questions that I'm sure you all will have at the beginning of class tomorrow. So I'm not going to rehash too much what we have here. I have changed a little bit of the language here in my definition, not in substantial ways, but I've added the philosophical component of this transcendentalist movement and done just a little bit of word smithing. And in that second bullet under transcendentalism, I just want you to understand that there's an element of utility here. The transcendentalists are suggesting that the natural environment of the United States is not simply a beautiful aesthetic backdrop, perhaps as it's portrayed in the paintings, say, of the Hudson River School painters. But there seems to be a suggestion, I want you to understand this, for both Emerson and Thoreau, that the natural environment is a powerful, it's an agent. It has use. It can be harnessed if we choose to surround ourselves, immerse ourselves, to consult it, the natural environment. We will be pleased and we will benefit from the experience. And so I wanted to just add that little element to it. This isn't just simple aesthetics. This is about what can the natural environment do for us. We've talked a bit about this, the fact that nature provides a powerful guide for the world, that in some ways in nature, when it's studied, there is a microcosm or a small piece that suggests the world as it ideally ought to exist. Civilization has had a role in transforming that world, but nature is, for the transcendentalists, the shining example, the ideal. It's the perfect form, perhaps, as Plato might indicate. But the world itself, particularly as market society, transportation revolution, market revolution, the advance of civilization, the perfect example evident in nature is being surrounded and threatened, perhaps, by changes that are happening within society. And I gave some examples of how the program, the backcountry therapy program that I was a part of for a few years in my early adulthood. It tried to harness the natural consequences that nature so readily provides as a way, as a tool of teaching young at-risk youth how they might better live their lives, and by confronting them with the limitations of their behaviors. Many of these young people, actually not all too different from some of us as well, right? When we're lazy, or we procrastinate, or we don't take care of our equipment, or don't take care of our things, we suffer. And that was the premise here. And in some ways, maybe it gives us an example of what this transcendental model of nature has to teach us. So the laws of civilization should not govern an individual's spirit. Civilization is a unavoidable, it's an unavoidable reality, but we ought not to treat civilization and its excesses and its flawed examples as a model for us to live by. Okay, and so we've essentially pursued this through to this point. And I want to make a point here that I didn't make earlier that I'm going to add here, because this works for me, and perhaps it will work for you. I want to discuss briefly an interesting topic, one that you've, I'm sure, heard plenty about, but you may have never heard it discussed in this way. I want to talk about adolescence. Okay? Most of us think of adolescence as a period of time that every young person pushes through. You might treat it as a synonym for, say, puberty, period where a young person sort of physically arrives at a state of adulthood. Their bodies have changed. They are now capable of procreation. They have arrived pretty close to an adulthood and a maturity that will be a part of their life for the decades that remain. I want to try to play with that definition briefly, and bear with me, because hopefully it will make sense to you why I'm doing this. I have a good friend who thinks of adolescence in slightly different terms, and he thinks of adolescence not as a noun or a period of time, but as a verb, that young people adolesce. And his definition of adolescing is that an individual is adolescing in their life so long as they are reliant upon others for their own set of values. So adolescence then is a period of time, a period of transition, where young people look to others for their values and their sense of self. Now, some of you are probably presently being haunted by memories of middle school, right? And I'll say this, every now and then I walk down the hallway of a middle school and I start to feel insecure. It's as if I can sense the spirit in the building of all these young people who are looking to other people for their sense of acceptance, for their sense of cool, for their sense of their values. Their values are coming at that point in their life from other people. Now let's be fair. According to this definition, if adolescence is actually, if we can turn into a verb, let's face it, a lot of us are adolescing still. You know, I mean, I'm thinking of neighbors who drive sports cars and are very concerned about having, you know, all the right memberships to the right clubs and wearing the right clothes and so on and so forth. But this is an interesting and I think actually useful way to think about adolescence. And the reason I think it's useful here, I think it's actually useful in a larger application to one's life, but the reason it's useful here is for Transcendentalists, market society is a place where individuality and individual authenticity, originality, is not particularly valued. People are essentially in a market society borrowing their values from other people, right? I mean, advertising, isn't that what advertising is? It's an effort for other people to convince us, we, the consumers, what it is that we need, what it is that we want, what it is that will make our lives complete. You know, once we finally get that new car, or we finally get that new stereo, or we finally get that new bike, our lives will be complete, right? So I'm playing upon this a little bit. For the Transcendentalists, think of them as people who are concerned that Americans are now getting their values and their sense of self-worth from market society, and we can, without too much of a further step, refer to that market society as the force of civilization. Now, along comes Emerson, and we know he is a very original thinker, no surprise. I mean, his thoughts have a lot to do with the importance of originality and authenticity in their own. And he says, you know what? The natural environment is our antidote to the market society that is emerging. We as Americans are now facing a new type of civilization, greater populations, greater industrialization. We are living closer to one another in greater urban settings. The messages that we're receiving about ourselves tend to be more and more complicated and interpreted by other people. We're competing with others. We're starting to feel more like numbers and less like known entities. And he is rather frightened and concerned about what this means. And what he wants to say is, hey, Americans, don't adolesce. You should not adolesce. The market society, the commercial values that come with it, will challenge you to get your sense of self, to get your values from other people. Don't go there. Don't go there. And here's how you don't go there. You don't go there by retreating to nature periodically, or bearing in mind that you are a unique, individual, wonderful person. Don't get lost in the crowd. Don't let your sense of self depart from you, abandon you. That is your secret to your success. It will serve you well. Don't let go of it. All these forces around you are trying to challenge you to let go of it. So when Emerson says, as I quote here, how easily we bow to badges and names and dead institutions, what I hear very clearly is he's saying our market society and its commercial values are turning us into inauthentic, unoriginal copycats who lack the confidence and strength to stand on our own values. And a lot of you, I'm sure, know what this feels like, right? Have you ever been in a group at a meeting when it seems like everyone agrees with something and there's this groupthink that's happening and everyone's jumping on board and you just fundamentally don't feel right about it? Like you're just like, no way, I see that. That's a terrible idea. And I need to speak truth to power, or truth to the consensus that's being built and manufactured around me. I'm not comfortable with that. And so Emerson would applaud you in those moments, and he would say, don't forget, you have a powerful and unique contribution. Keep that alive. And how do you keep that alive? You keep it alive by remembering nature. For Thoreau is going to say retreat to nature. It will provide you with the vaccination against commercial values. It will keep you original. It will keep you adopting values for yourself rather than adopting someone else's. And so for Emerson, we need to remain independent. We need to do our own thinking. You see here I've put we need to have our own values and our own inspiration. Those are going to come from nature. And so for Emerson, when he talks about the oversoul, I don't have too much time to continue here, but if I need to, I'll make some comments at the beginning of class tomorrow. The oversoul is that inner part of our nature that gives us, if we stick to our own values and our own inspiration, we will make pretty amazing contributions to the society that is around us. All those people that are adolescing are going to be like lemmings just following the machinery of capitalism and the new industrial market society. But if we remain distinct and original, we will make those wonderful contributions and breakthroughs. We just have to have confidence in ourselves.